to throw, and let's see, he holds on to it. Does he hold on to it? And they have a fight. Here they go, fella, and this. And the bench is empty.
He just didn't look like he was as intense as he played. I don't know. I always called him. I always thought of him as sort of the silent assassin. You know, he's so unassuming. Comes up to the plate, you know, kind of nice and soft, and all of a sudden, rake. So you had to be careful when you played against him.
MLB will never forgive Carlton Fisk. That phrase sounds harsh at first. It sounds unfair even. Because for a long time, Carlton Fisk was exactly what baseball needed. He was tough. He was proud. He was built like a man who had been carved out of a Vermont hillside and pointed at a baseball field. He played the game hard, played it long, and played it better than almost anyone who ever crouched behind home plate. He became a Hall of Famer. He became a legend. He became the kind of player that other players tell stories about decades after the last pitch was thrown. But somewhere along the way, the man behind the mask became something else. He became a judge. He became a fighter. He became someone that teammate after teammate, rival after rival, manager after manager, and owner after owner simply could not stand to be around. I am Mason, and this is Baseball Icons. And before we go any further, if this video is hitting right so far, go ahead and give it some hype. Use the hype feature right here on this video. It helps the channel keep growing, and it tells us you want more stories exactly like this one. Now let us talk about why so many people in baseball simply never got over Carlton Fisk. We are going to go through the key players and moments that built this story, but we are doing it in reverse order. We start at the end of his career and work our way back to where it all began. Each conflict carries a number. We start at number 9 and count down to number 1. And by the time we get to number 1, you will understand exactly why the title of this video is what it is. But first, you need to understand where Carlton Fisk came from, because you cannot understand the man without understanding the ground that made him. Fisk was born on December 26, 1947, in Bellows Falls, Vermont. He grew up in Charlestown, New Hampshire, right in the heart of the Connecticut River Valley. This was not a place that produced soft people. It was a place where you worked hard, kept your complaints to yourself, and earned every single thing you got. His father, Cecil, was an engineer and a farmer, a man of precision and discipline. Cecil Fisk lived by one rule above all others: do something right or do not do it at all. That was it. No shortcuts, no excuses, no participation trophies. You either did the job the right way or you had failed. Carlton absorbed that lesson completely. As a kid, he was a strong athlete in basketball and soccer. In 1963, while playing in a regional basketball playoff at the Boston Garden, his performance was so impressive that Boston Celtics owner Walter Brown reportedly turned to someone and asked who that kid was. That is the kind of player he already was at that age. And yet, even after his best games, Cecil Fisk's feedback was never about what Carlton did right. It was about what Carlton missed. After one of Carlton's strongest performances, his father's only comment was that he had missed 4 free throws. That was it. No praise. Just the gap between what was done and what could have been done better. That environment built a man who used small slights and high internal standards as fuel. A man who never felt like he had arrived because his father never told him he had. And when you take that kind of upbringing and you put it inside a major league clubhouse full of different personalities and different ideas about what the game means, things are going to get messy. His outlook on life was described by biographer Doug Wilson as similar to a John Wayne character. He would not be wronged. He would not be insulted. He would not be laid a hand on. That is who Carlton Fisk was before he ever played a single game in the big leagues. And that is who he remained for his entire career. He made his pro debut in September of 1969 with the Boston Red Sox. And from that point forward, the game would never be quite the same. Number 9 is the steroid era and the judge who would not stop talking. By the time the home run records were being shattered in the late 1990s, Carlton Fisk was long retired. He had already been cut. He had already walked away from the game bitter and bruised by the way it ended. But bitterness did not make him quiet. When Mark McGwire publicly suggested that steroids did not really affect home run production, Fisk came out swinging. He called that idea a crock. Plain and simple. He pointed to the numbers the way he pointed to everything in his life, with total conviction and zero apology. Look at the data he put forward. Hank Aaron, Babe Ruth, and Willie Mays, 3 of the greatest power hitters who ever lived, averaged around 18 home runs per season after the age of 39. The human body slows down, the bat speed drops, the production falls. That is what happens naturally. Then you look at Barry Bonds hitting 73 home runs at the age of 39. 73. Fisk looked at that number and said it did not pass the smell test. And the thing is, he was not wrong. The logic held up. The comparison was real. But there is a difference between being right and being heard. By the time Fisk was making these arguments, people were tired of listening to him. He had spent his whole career positioning himself as the standard bearer of the right way. He had fought players on the field. He had screamed at teammates and opponents alike. He had argued with managers and gone to war with owners. And now in retirement, he was still there. still judging, still pointing, still telling everyone else where they had fallen short. It was exhausting to many people in and around the game, not because the facts were wrong, but because the delivery was always the same. Carlton Fisk standing above everyone else, informing the world of what was acceptable and what was not. That reputation never went away, and the steroid era gave him one more platform to climb on top of. Number 8 is the bitter ending with the White Sox and what the hotels in Cleveland mean. Nobody deserves to find out they are done in a hotel room. It is one of the coldest ways a professional sports team can close a chapter. There is no ceremony. There is no press conference. There is no handshake from the owner and a moment to say goodbye to the fans. There is just a conversation in a hallway or over a phone line, and then you are no longer employed. That is what happened to Carlton Fisk in 1993. The Chicago White Sox cut him while the team was on the road, staying in a hotel in Cleveland, Ohio. After 24 years in professional baseball, after playing more games behind the plate than any catcher before him at that time, after giving everything his body had to 2 franchises across 2 decades, he was released in a hotel room like the final page of a book nobody wanted to finish. The bitterness that came from that moment was deep and lasting. Fisk pulled back from the game in a way that players of his stature rarely do. He did not show up at events. He did not take part in the kind of post-retirement ceremonies and appearances that helped tie a career to its legacy in the public memory. He was done, and the game had made it very clear it was done with him in return. But you cannot understand that ending without understanding what led to it. His relationship with White Sox owner Jerry Reinsdorf had been a slow-motion war for years. Every contract renewal was a battle. Every negotiation was bitter and contentious. Fisk felt constantly undervalued. Reinsdorf was a hardline owner who ran his franchise like a business and was not interested in emotional arguments about what a player had earned through loyalty and longevity. Neither man could find common ground, and when a player and an owner both refuse to bend, the player is always the one who ends up in the hotel room. His exit from Boston years earlier carried the same shape. In 1981, general manager Haywood Sullivan failed to mail Fisk's contract on time. That one administrative error made Fisk a free agent, opening the door for him to sign with Chicago. But the deeper reason things had gotten so bad in Boston was the ongoing battle over his contract value. The Red Sox owners had publicly insulted him during negotiations. They refused to acknowledge that the market for players was rising and that his numbers and his presence were worth real money. For a man who had built everything he was on, the idea that hard work earned respect, being told by his own organization that he was not worth what he was asking for, was an insult that cut all the way to the bone. Pride is expensive, and Carlton Fisk paid for his constantly. Number 7 is Bobby Valentine and the unwritten rule that became a shouting match. Not every conflict Carlton Fisk had left marks on the field. Some of them were quieter in a different way, fought in press conferences and dugouts, and through the invisible language of professional baseball's unwritten code. His clash with manager Bobby Valentine was that kind of fight. Valentine found Fisk's deliberate, methodical pace behind the plate arrogant. He thought Fisk acted like a general who had outranked the manager without anyone voting on it, and one of their ugliest moments came over something most fans in the stands would not even notice. Late in a game, with his team holding a big lead, Valentine had his players continuing to steal bases. Fisk watched this happen, and he hated it. In his mind, you do not steal bases when you are already winning by a large margin. You have made your point. The other team knows they are beaten. Running up the score and twisting the knife is a violation of the professional respect that the game requires between competitors. That is the code. It is unwritten. It is passed down from older players to younger ones. And Fisk viewed it as sacred, so he said something, loudly, from behind the plate, in front of everyone. And what followed was a public shouting match between a catcher and a manager that made both men look like they had completely lost the ability to communicate like adults. The thing that made this conflict emblematic of Fisk's whole career is the dynamic it exposed. He genuinely did not believe that a manager's authority should override his own sense of what was right on a baseball field. He was not trying to undermine Valentine for personal reasons. He was enforcing the code. He just had never learned, or perhaps never wanted to learn, the difference between being the conscience of a baseball game and being someone who respects the people around him enough to let them lead. There is a version of Carlton Fisk who finds a way to say the same thing Valentine needed to hear without making it a public confrontation. That version of Fisk never existed. Number 6 is Reggie Jackson and the era of baseball that Fisk went to war against and lost. Carlton Fisk did not dislike Reggie Jackson because of something specific that Jackson did to him on a baseball field. He disliked him because of everything Jackson represented. The two men existed in the same sport, but in completely different versions of it. Fisk's baseball was blue-collar work, collar. It was sweat and silence and producing results without asking anyone to notice. Jackson's baseball was spectacle. It was walking into a room and making sure every eye was on you before you even touched a bat. When Reggie Jackson arrived in New York in 1977 as one of the first players to truly benefit from the new era of free agency, Fisk saw everything he despised coming through the door in pinstripes. Jackson was loud. He was theatrical. He called himself Mr. October, and he wore the nickname proudly. He loved the headline, he chased the brand. He made himself into a folk hero in a city that already had more than enough of them, and the game changed around him and people like him. Other players started to follow that model. Being an athlete became about being a personality, having a slogan, having a style, having a market value that went beyond the box score. Fisk could not stand any of it. He had what you might call a purity of purpose. He showed up, he worked, he played, he went home. He came back and did it again. That was it. The idea that someone would show up to a baseball game thinking about their brand, their nickname, their commercial appeal was offensive to him at a deep level. He called that attitude selfish. He described the culture he saw building around him as me, I. And he said it with real anger, not performance, real, genuine disgust. But here is the problem with going to war against a tide. The tide does not care that you are standing in it. Free agency was not going away. The celebrity athlete was not going away. The era of individual branding in sports was not going away. It was only just beginning. And Fisk, refusing to accept it, refusing to adapt, refusing to find any merit in the idea that players had the right to enjoy their own fame, made himself into a relic of a past that was not coming back. He fought that battle alone, and he lost. And losing it with the kind of stubbornness that Fisk brought to everything he did only made him more isolated. Number 5 is the Deion Sanders confrontation, and the day everything got complicated fast. By the time we reached 1990, Carlton Fisk had transformed into a specific kind of figure in baseball. He was not just a veteran catcher at this point. He had become the unofficial professor of baseball etiquette, the keeper of the code, the man who would tell you exactly what you were doing wrong and back it up with his fist if necessary. And then Deion Sanders walked into his life, and the classroom got very loud very fast. Fisk had a problem with Sanders before anything specific happened between them. Sanders was a two-sport athlete in the truest sense of the word. He was playing professional football and professional baseball at the same time, and succeeding at both. He was flashy. He was confident in a way that left no room for interpretation. He wore his personality in neon. And in Fisk's view, Sanders had not earned the right to any of that. He was still unproven at the major league level. The attitude was ahead of the resume. That bothered Fisk deeply. Then came May 22nd, 1990 at Yankee Stadium, and the flashpoint arrived before the game was even fully underway. Fisk saw Sanders doing something in the batter's box that told him everything he thought he already knew. Sanders was using his bat to draw a shape in the dirt. He was drawing a $sign right there in the batter's box of a major league game. A $sign. That symbol meant exactly one thing to Carlton Fisk. It meant Sanders was thinking about money and fame and himself instead of about baseball. It meant he was exactly what Fisk feared the game was turning into. Then in the third inning, Sanders hit a pop fly to shortstop Ozzie Guillen. He took one step toward first, maybe two, then he turned around and walked back toward the dugout. He did not run. He did not hustle. He watched it come down and he quit on the play before it was over. Fisk snapped. He screamed at Sanders with a string of words that included strong language and a clear message. Run the ball out. Do your job. Respect what this game is. When Sanders came back to the plate in the fifth inning, he had something to say back. He told Fisk that the days of slavery were over. It was a loaded line, a culturally charged line. Fisk ripped off his mask and told Sanders he would fight him right there. Fisk would later say he was protecting the legends of the game, Ruth and DiMaggio, and the meaning of the pinstripes. He believed Sanders was disrespecting everything those men had built, but the way many people received that moment was very different. They saw an older man in a position of power policing a younger man's way of being in the world. They saw a gatekeeper telling someone from a different generation and a different background that their style was unacceptable. And the reaction was not on Fisk's side. Younger players and fans looked at that scene and saw exactly what they expected to see from Carlton Fisk, someone who thought his era was the only valid one and everyone else needed to get in line. Number 4 is George Bell and the MVP who still got ordered back to the box. If the Sanders confrontation showed one side of Fisk's enforcement style, the George Bell incident showed another. Because Bell was not a rookie, Bell was not unproven, George Bell was the reigning American League Most Valuable Player. He had earned that award through real production in real games. He was respected around the league as one of the tougher, more competitive players of his era. None of that mattered to Carlton Fisk for even 1 second. In another 1990 confrontation, Bell stayed at the plate after a pitch to argue with the pitcher. He was standing there, still talking, still directing his frustration toward the mound, holding up the flow of the game. Fisk had seen enough. He looked at Bell and gave him a direct order: get back in the box. Bell refused. He was not going to be told what to do by a catcher, MVP, or no MVP in the other direction. So Fisk moved toward him, and the benches cleared again. Another brawl. Another moment where the escalation went from 0 zero to full chaos because Fisk was incapable of letting something small stay small. What makes this moment so telling is what it reveals about the way Fisk processed the world around him. He did not have a sliding scale for how much authority a person had earned. He did not look at George Bell's trophy and decide this was a situation that called for a different approach. To Fisk, the code was the code. An MVP who violated it was just as wrong as a rookie who violated it, and deserved exactly the same response. That level of consistency could be called principled. It could also be called completely unable to read a situation. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Probably, but the result? Another bench-clearing incident, another set of angry players, another moment of chaos in a game that just needed someone to take a breath, tells you everything about the cost of that consistency. Number 3 is May 20th, 1976. The Yankees brawl, Lou Piniella, Greg Nettles, and the afternoon Bill Lee's career ended. Everything about the 1970s Red Sox-Yankees rivalry was overheated. The fans hated each other. The players hated each other. The organizational bitterness ran so deep that it bled into every game they played. And on May 20th, 1976, all of that heat came to a full boil in one of the most violent afternoons in the history of the rivalry. Carlton Fisk was at the center of it. That is where he always seemed to end up. Lou Piniella was trying to score on a base hit. He came in hard. He came in with the full weight of a man who was not interested in being stopped. Some accounts say he tried to kick the baseball right out of Fisk's glove as he slid in. Fisk held onto the ball. Then he tagged Piniella again. Not lightly, hard, directly on the head. That was the moment everything went sideways. Piniella and Fisk started fighting right there on top of home plate. The benches emptied. The bullpens ran in from the outfield. One reporter watching from the press box said it looked like a hockey game had suddenly broken out in the middle of a baseball field. That image says everything about how the afternoon felt. But the most significant damage did not happen between Fisk and Piniella. The part of that brawl that had lasting consequences happened in the pile of bodies away from the plate. Red Sox pitcher Bill Lee, known as Spaceman for his personality and his unconventional style on and off the field, got caught in a secondary fight with Yankees third baseman Greg Nettles and outfielder Mickey Rivers. Nettles had his reasons. Lee had said things about the Yankees earlier that compared their street fighting style to something not fit to print. Nettles remembered. So when the brawl broke out and Lee was suddenly within reach, Nettles picked him up and slammed him down hard onto his left shoulder. The force of the impact caused a severely separated shoulder and a broken collarbone. Bill Lee would say for the rest of his life that he never fully recovered from that injury. His career as an elite pitcher was effectively finished in that moment. The damage done to his shoulder that afternoon stole the best years he still had left in his arm. The Red Sox held that grudge for a long time, and Fisk, the emotional engine of the whole confrontation, the man whose hard tag on Piniella's head lit the fuse, was never forgiven by the Yankee establishment for what that day cost everyone. It was not just that Fisk got into a fight. It was that his intensity, his absolute refusal to give an inch, pulled everyone around him into a fire that left one innocent man with a career-altering injury. That is the collateral damage of living by the code at full volume every single day. Sooner or later, the people closest to you get burned. Number 2 is 1975, Pete Rose, and the home run that swallowed a championship. Carlton Fisk's most famous moment is well known by anyone who has ever watched a clip of classic baseball. Game 6 of the 1975 World Series. 12th inning, the ball going down the left field line, drifting, hanging in the night air over Fenway Park. And Fisk, watching it go, waving his arms, twisting his whole body as if he could physically steer the ball fair with the force of his will. The ball stayed fair. The Red Sox won Game 6. And that image, those few seconds of Carlton Fisk waving at a baseball in the dark over Fenway Park, became one of the most reproduced photographs and clips in the history of the sport. But the Cincinnati Reds won the World Series. They beat the Red Sox in Game 7. The Big Red Machine was the best team in baseball that year. They earned their championship, they deserved their place in history, and yet, when people talk about 1975, they do not lead with the Reds' title. They lead with Fisk's home run. They lead with a moment from a game that was part of a series the Reds won. That imbalance became a quiet source of frustration for people inside the Cincinnati organization. Not because Fisk had done anything wrong. You cannot blame a man for hitting a famous home run. But the way baseball memory works, the way iconic images overpower the final score, meant that the Reds' championship was perpetually being shared with a moment that belonged to a team that lost. During Game 6 itself, there was a smaller but telling exchange between Fisk and Pete Rose. Rose was one of the most intensely competitive players in baseball history, but he expressed that intensity in a different way than Fisk did. Where Fisk was locked in and silent and internal, Rose was chatty and electric and visibly thrilled to be in the biggest game. In the 10th inning of that legendary night, Rose walked up to an exhausted Fisk at the plate and started talking. He said something along the lines of there having never been a game like this one, of it being incredible, of how much he was loving every second of it. Fisk was barely conscious. He was running on nothing. He was falling asleep on his feet from the combination of the the late hour and the pressure of the moment, and Rose's giddy energy struck him as strange and out of place, almost surreal. Two men in the same game experiencing it in entirely different emotional languages. After the series, Fisk made a comment that showed he understood the mythology that was building around that home run among New England fans. He noted that people in New England thought the Red Sox had won the series, 3-4. He said it in a way that acknowledged the odd relationship between iconic moments and final results. But he did not redirect the spotlight. He did not go out of his way to say the Reds deserved more credit than they were getting. He just let the comment land as an observation and moved on. That is so deeply Fisk. He saw what was happening. He named it, and he did nothing to change it. Because why would he? The home run was real. The image was his. And Carlton Fisk never gave anything back without a fight. Number 1 is Thurman Munson, the brawl at Fenway, and the rivalry that never healed. If you had to choose one story, one relationship, one conflict that explains Carlton Fisk better than anything else, it is his war with Thurman Munson. This was not a competition between two professionals who quietly respected each other while publicly competing. This was personal and physical and deeply, stubbornly permanent. It was a rivalry that lasted longer than it had any right to and produced damage that never got repaired. The seeds of it were planted in 1971 before anything significant had even happened between them. Fisk was a rookie. He was new and eager and trying to prove he belonged. Munson was already established as a leader on the Yankees. During a routine groundout, Fisk chased Munson down the first baseline to back up the throw. It was the kind of hustle play that coaches teach from day one. But Munson read it differently. He saw a rookie trying to show him up, trying to make him look slow or careless by comparison. That was the first crack in the wall between them, and it was followed by years of media attention that made the whole thing worse. The national media loved the contrast. They put Fisk on a pedestal and called him the next great American League catcher, the heir to the legacies of Johnny Bench and Yogi Berra. They printed those comparisons often, and they did it at Munson's direct expense. Munson had won the Rookie of the Year award in 1970. He was already good. He was already recognized, but he had not won unanimously. And then Fisk came along in 1972 and won unanimously. A clean sweep. And the press made sure everyone knew the difference. Munson was the overlooked, gritty, unsentimental captain of the Bronx. Fisk was the handsome, chiseled golden boy of New England. That framing built a wall that kept getting taller every time someone published a comparison piece. Then came August 1st, 1973 at Fenway Park, in a moment that made everything that came before it feel like a preview. The Yankees were trying a suicide squeeze in the 9th inning of a tied game. Munson was on third. Gene Michael was at the plate. Michael missed the bunt attempt and then made it worse by standing in Fisk's path, physically trying to interfere with the catcher before Munson arrived. Fisk removed Michael from his way with the kind of efficiency that left no room for debate. Then he planted himself and braced. Munson came in with everything he had, every frustration, every slight, every comparison that had ever been made between them. He barreled into Fisk with full force. Fisk held onto the ball. The umpire called Munson out, and then the real chaos started. Munson did not just collide and accept the call. He stayed on top of Fisk. He tried to pin him to the ground long enough for other Yankee base runners to move up. He was still trying to win the play even after it was officially over. And Fisk, who believed to his core that no man had the right to hold him down or disrespect him, kicked Munson off and threw a punch. The brawl that followed lasted nearly 10 full minutes. Both catchers were ejected along with multiple other players. The field was chaos. And when it was finally over and the clubhouses settled back into a simmering quiet, Munson was unrepentant. He told reporters to go ask Fisk who had won the fight. He said Fisk knew the answer. It was a sharp, cold quote that summed up the relationship between those two men better than any analysis could. The rivalry did not end with the brawl. It just kept burning at a lower temperature. Later on, Munson made a small gesture towards civility. He told Fisk he had never said anything bad about him in the press. It was not an apology. It was not peace. But it was something. A tiny reach across the gap. And Fisk reportedly ignored him. He would not acknowledge it. He would not meet Munson even partway. The gap stayed exactly where it was. And then Thurman Munson died in 1979 in a plane crash at 32 years old. The rivalry was frozen. There was no resolution, no last conversation, no chance for either man to find a different note to end on. Just the permanent record of everything that had already happened between them, locked in place forever. That is the story underneath all the brawls and feuds and confrontations. Not just that Fisk made enemies, but that he kept them. He held on to every conflict with the same grip he used to hold onto the ball when somebody was trying to knock it loose. He did not let go. He did not forgive. And so no one ever had a reason to forgive him either. Take all 9 of these moments and lay them side by side. Number 9, the steroid-era judge who could not stop playing moral boss. Number 8, the brutal exits from Boston and Chicago, burned by ownership on both ends of his career. Number 7, the Bobby Valentine clash and the refusal to accept that any manager carried more authority over the game than he did. Number 6, the Reggie Reggie Jackson era, and a one-man philosophical war against celebrity baseball that Fisk was always going to lose. Number 5, the Deion Sanders confrontation that cracked open into something cultural and generational, and left Fisk looking like someone who could not see past his own era. Number 4, the George Bell brawl that proved not even an MVP was safe from his enforcement. Number 3, the 1976 disaster where his intensity at home plate set off a chain reaction that ended Bill Lee's career as an elite pitcher. Number 2, the 1975 World Series where one swing of his bat swallowed a championship that belonged to someone else. And number 1, the Munson rivalry, the most personal and permanent conflict of his entire career, sealed forever before either man could change it. Every single moment follows the same shape. Fisk draws a line. Someone crosses it or drifts near it. Fisk does not talk it through. He does not look for middle ground. He confronts, he escalates, he fights, he moves on without apology, and he never looks back to see what is still smoldering behind him. That is the code. That is the man. And that is why the game never forgave him, because he never forgave anyone else first. He was the self-appointed guardian of how baseball was supposed to look. And guardians who never soften, never doubt themselves, never admit they might have gone too far, they do not get forgiven. They get remembered. They get talked about. They get argued over at bars and in comment sections and around kitchen tables for decades after they are done playing. But they do not get forgiven. And yet, here's the other side of all of this. Carlton Fisk was extraordinary. The very things that made him so difficult to be around were the same things that made him one of the greatest players the game has ever seen. His refusal to bend is what carried him back onto the field after a knee injury in 1974 that doctors feared might end his career. His standards are what allowed him to still play at a high level well into his 40s, outlasting younger players who were paid far more. His code kept him in the game for 24 years at the most physically punishing position in sports. He played more games behind the plate than any catcher in history at the time he retired. That record did not happen by accident or by luck, because to Carlton Fisk it was. His father taught him that you either do something right or you do not do it at all. And Fisk lived that every day of his career. He did not love halfway. He did not compete halfway. He did not fight halfway. And he did not forgive halfway either, which meant he mostly did not forgive at all. That is the cost of the code. It gave him a Hall of Fame career. It gave him numbers that will stand for a very long time. And it gave him a lifetime of burned bridges and long-held grudges that outlasted the games themselves. Fans in New England still love him. Fans in Chicago still respect what he meant to that franchise. They remember the home run. They remember the hustle. They remember the catcher who treated every game like it mattered more than almost anything else. And maybe that is the most honest thing you can say about Carlton Fisk. He believed in the game so completely that he could not stand to watch anyone treat it as anything less than sacred. He never tried to be forgivable. That is the final truth about Carlton Fisk. He did not want your forgiveness. He did not think he needed it. And that pride, that never apologize, always fight pride, is the reason his name still carries weight. Whether you love him or resent him, you cannot ignore him. You cannot dismiss a man who gave 24 years to a game and never once did it halfway. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe to Baseball Icons, and drop a comment below telling us which of these 9 moments you think was the most revealing about who Fisk really was. We will see you in the next one.